What was life really like for the average American? You think you know, but the truth is far more shocking and far more difficult than you can imagine. Are you ready to uncover the daily struggles that forged a nation? Let's start with something we all take for granted: waking up. In the 1800s, there were no alarm clocks. People rose with the sun, or even before it, their days dictated by daylight. For affarme. The day began at 4 or 5 a.m. The first task, tending to the animals. Cows needed milking, chickens needed feeding, and horses needed to be readied for a long day of plowing. And what did they eat? Forget your morning coffee and avocado toast. Breakfast was often a hearty, heavy meal to fuel a day of hard labor. Think cornmeal mush, salt-cured pork, and maybe some bread baked in a hearth oven. Preparing this meal was a monumental task in itself. A woman's day started just as early, stoking the fire in the hearth. This wasn't a simple flick of a switch. It meant gathering wood, getting a flame to catch, and carefully managing the heat for cooking. A single fire was the source of all heat for cooking, warmth, and boiling water. Speaking of water, where did it come from? There were no faucets. Every single drop had to be fetched by hand. This meant carrying heavy buckets from a well, a stream, or a spring, often multiple times a day. Think about that for a moment. Every sip you take, every pot you boil, every bit of cleaning you do, it all started with a long, strenuous walk and a heavy load. And the water wasn't always clean. Contamination was a constant threat, leading to devastating diseases like cholera and typhoid, which could wipe out entire families. Now, let's talk about hygiene. It's a subject we rarely consider, but it was a central struggle of 19th century life. Bathing was an infrequent luxury, not a daily routine. The process was an ordeal. Water had to be hauled and then heated over the fire, pail by pail. The entire family would often use the same tub of water, starting with the father, tente sons, then the mother, and finally the daughters. By the end, the water was barely clean. Toilets. Indoor plumbing was a dream for all but the wealthiest city dwellers late in the century. Most people used an outhouse, a small wooden shack with a hole in the ground, located a fair distance from the house. Imagine braving a snowstorm or a downpour in the middle of the night for a trip to the outhouse. Personal cleanliness was a different story too. Soap was often a harsh, homemade concoction of lion animal fat, tough on both dirt and skin. And dental care. It was rudimentary at best. People cleaned their teeth with twigs, salt, or chalk. Toothaches were often cured by pulling the tooth, usually without any form of anesthetic. Blacksmiths or barbers often doubled as the local dentists. The pain must have been unimaginable. Let's move on to the world of work. They were responsible for cooking all meals from scratch, baking bread, preserving food for the winter by canning or drying. They also tended the vegetable garden, raised the children, and cared for the sick. Candles were expensive, made from animal tallow and giving off a smoky, smelly light. Whale oil lamps were better, but costly. For many, the day ended with the sun, and the nights were long and dark. This darkness also brought danger. What about health and medicine? This is where the reality of the 1800s becomes truly harrowing. Germ theory wasn't widely accepted until the latter part of the century. Doctors had little understanding of what caused disease. A simple cut could become infected and lead to a deadly case of sepsis. Childbirth was incredibly dangerous for both mother and child. Postpartum infections were common and often fatal. 1 in 3 children did not live to see their 5th birthday. Diseases we now vaccinate against, like measles, mumps, and whooping cough, were common childhood killers. If you got seriously ill, medical treatments were often more dangerous than the disease itself. Bloodletting, the practice of draining blood to balance the body's humors, was a common treatment for everything from fevers to headaches. Doctors used unsterilized instruments, unknowingly spreading infection from one patient to the next. Surgery was a brutal last resort, performed without anesthesia until the 1840s. Patients were held or tied down, while surgeons sawed through bone. The concept of a sterile operating room was non-existent. Life in the growing cities wasn't necessarily easier. While cities offered new opportunities, they also presented new dangers. Early industrial cities were crowded, unsanitary, and polluted. Tenement buildings housed multiple families in single, cramped rooms with no ventilation or running water. Garbage and human waste were often thrown directly into the streets, creating a breeding ground for disease. Factory work was grueling and dangerous. Workers, including young children, labored for 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, in unsafe conditions for pitifully low wages. There were no workers' compensation or safety regulations. If you were injured on the job, you were simply fired. Even communication was a struggle. In the early 1800s, a letter could take weeks or even months to cross the country. Families who moved west were often completely cut off from their relatives back east, sometimes never hearing from them again. The world was much larger and more isolating. The invention of the telegraph in the 1840s began to change this. But for the average person, news still traveled slowly. So, when we look back at the 1800s, it's important to see beyond the quaint daguerreotypes and historical reenactments. Life was a constant battle against hunger, disease, darkness, and exhaustion. It was a life of incredible hardship, but also one of incredible resilience. They endured these struggles and In doing so, laid the foundations for the world we live in today. Their strength and perseverance are a humbling reminder of how far we've come. What part of 19th century life do you find the most shocking? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this journey back in time eye-opening, please give this video a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Thanks for watching.
If you love uncovering the truth, don't forget to subscribe. More hidden history is coming every week, only on History Uncovered.